Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
That all sounds very ominous, but what do you mean exactly? Zoro calmly asked. What I mean is, you can meet God now. James gripped Zoro's fountain pen tightly and thrust it toward the crime lord's left eye. Zoro was a gang leader who had been dancing on the edge of a blade for years. His skills were naturally exceptional. He instinctively turned his head and pulled it back, dodging James's stab. Mr. Tucker, you don't seem to understand. I make a phone call and your little girlfriends go through a hell Caligula couldn't imagine. Is that so? Make the call, James said with a cold smile. Zoro shook his head and dialed the subordinate's number. When the call was connected, an eerie voice came from the other side. Hello, I am the Soul Reaper of the Dark Abyss. I have killed your men. Zoro staggered in shock. The phone slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. The slaughter of his men was upsetting enough, but what truly terrified Zoro was the involvement of the most feared assassins group in the world, the Dark Abyss. Every member possessed unique and extraordinary skills, and their reputation for relentlessness and brutality was unrivaled. Being targeted by the Dark Abyss was tantamount to a death sentence, but Zoro had done nothing to provoke them. Why were they coming after his people? He looked at James and his staring eyes bulged even farther out of their sockets. You are a member of the Dark Abyss? What do you think? James smirked. Zoro's eyes revealed a trace of fear for the first time in decades. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that this nondescript young man could actually be an assassin from the Dark Abyss. Of course, earlier that evening, James had performed miraculous feats of violent combat in line with the abilities of the world's elite killers. Zoro thought feverishly, damn it, I've made a terrible mistake. It's suicide to provoke the Dark Abyss. At that moment, his preternatural confidence failed him. The leader of the largest underground gang in London began trembling like a damn chihuahua. At that moment, Zoro's remaining forces smashed through the door of the conference room abutting Zoro's office. James remained calm. He again took the cigar from Zoro's hand and took a puff. Then he went to the office door, tossed out 2 grenades, then quickly closed the door again. His face never changed expression. The grenades exploded with a terrible noise. The powerful shockwave shook the office door violently. Then, there was no sound or movement from outside the door at all. Zoro looked at James with astonishment. As the leader of the outfit, it wasn't as if he had never seen a ruthless person before, but this was a murderous devil, the killer to the core. Fear spread through his entire body like a living thing. Mr. Tucker, if I say that I am willing to sign over all assets of and control over the outfit, will you consider letting me go? He understood his situation very well. Now that's a very interesting question. James looked at Zoro intently, favoring him with an enigmatic smile. Unfortunately, sir, I am not interested in money. In this world, James cared about his family, his friends, and his 4 women. Nothing else. Do you think I look like someone who needs money? James smiled as if he was playing a casual game. On any other occasion, Zoro would have responded with something like, yes, you look like a beggar, a goddamn pauper, a cheap punk without 2 nickels to rub together. But now he found it impossible to say anything. Ugh! Castle, who had been cowering under Zoro's desk, suddenly jumped up with a high-pitched scream and grabbed the gun James had placed on the table. He fired it wildly at Zoro. Zoro, you prick, go to hell, you dog, go to hell! Bullets riddled Zoro's body, leaving it a shredded, bloody mess that was difficult to look at. It was only when Castle's crazy wail ran out of steam that he stopped shooting. Zoro looked at Castle, who was still pointing the gun at him in shock. He raised his hand with difficulty and pointed. In the end, he only said 1 word. You. Then he died. Castle threw down the gun as if it had transformed into a rattlesnake. He looked at Zorro's ruined corpse on the ground. Although he was afraid, he felt a great burden had been lifted. Ever since he'd been targeted by the outfit, each day had felt like a year. Having found a strange sort of peace, he turned to James and said,
"Boss, what I did was unforgivable, but I really was forced by them. But what's the point of saying that now? Go ahead. Give me a quick death."
Castle lowered his head, waiting for James to shoot him. However, James grinned and said, "Castle, why would I kill you? Hurry up and get out of here, or you'll get jammed up with the cops."
"You're not going to kill me?"
Castle asked in surprise. "Nope." James kicked the glass out of the window facing outside and pulled a thin rope from around his waist. He secured it to the heavy steel desk and prepared to exit.
"Boss, wait."
"What is it?" James turned and asked impatiently.
"Can you take me with you?"
James was flabbergasted. "Are you kidding?" Castle replied,
"Well, you didn't kill me."
James rubbed his eyes. What kind of logic was this? He said, "Indeed, I didn't kill you, but I never said I would save you." James slipped out the window and quickly made his way down the side of the building to the ground, then rapidly disappeared into the darkness behind the club. Castle ran to the window. When he found that the thin rope was still there, he uttered a small prayer of gratitude. James heard approaching sirens as he sprinted up the hill behind the Cloud Walk Club. He grinned and said, "I helped you get rid of an underground criminal organization. You're welcome." He was not surprised by the arrival of the police because he was the one who had called them. "Protect and serve, gentlemen," James said as he disappeared over the hill. According to Dax, the Soul Reaper had moved Edward and the four women to a safe space at an address downtown. James headed into London and found them. He was surprised to find that the Soul Reaper did not flaunt any unique tattoos or foreboding temperament. He was a very handsome young man, about 25 years old. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and looked like a student or the nice neighbor boy next door. "Hello, you are Mr. Tucker, right?" The Soul Reaper stepped forward and extended his hand. He said, "I have heard about you for a long time. Dax has the highest respect for you." The Soul Reaper's eyes were full of admiration. The handshake was interrupted when the four women saw James. They rushed up to him and hugged him tightly. Then they burst into tears, clinging desperately to James's body. Obviously, the night's events had frightened them badly. James let them beat him up with furious punches and kicks, allowing them to vent their emotions. The Soul Reaper was a sensible person. He didn't say anything. He flashed James an understanding smile and stepped back. Witnessing the love and devotion of the four women, he reckoned that no man alive would fail to feel envious. Edward clearly did. He stared at the love fest for James with undisguised longing. James murmured reassurances and kept stroking their shoulders with his hands. He regretted that he had not been by their sides when the trouble came down and knew the best course of action was to let them release their pent-up fear without interference. After a few minutes, Krista raised her head from James's chest. She looked up at him and asked gently, "Are you hurt? Were you in some kind of danger?" "Yes, James, did something happen to you?" Vanessa also asked sweetly. "Oh no, are you hurt?" Katie straightened and asked with concern. Cindy emotionally said, "James, we were so frightened when they came for us. I think you must have faced an even greater danger over there." James just grinned at them and said casually, "There's nothing to worry about. Look, I'm perfectly fine." They understood that James was a person who, no matter how much he suffered, would always greet them with a smile. However, they were all intelligent people. They were aware of how much danger James must have faced. They stopped crying and left sweet kisses on James's face, one after another. The scene made the Soul Reaper and Edward so envious that they wanted to scream. Edward squashed the feeling down and walked over with a smile on his face to greet James. He was greatly relieved to have just escaped death after all. "Thank God you have finally returned safely, Mr. Tucker." James gave him a friendly hug and asked, "Edward, you must have been scared to death, right?" "Yes, of course. I was just thinking that it was the most terrifying moment I've ever experienced in my life." Edward continued, "Right before everything went crazy, I was discussing you with these ladies. They told me a lot of your stories and I was very fascinated by them. Then the door was kicked open and a bunch of thugs in suits rushed in. They were holding guns. We were all frightened. They pointed the guns at us and kept shouting. We didn't even dare to breathe. We could only do what they said. In the end, they covered our heads with black plastic bags and took us away from the house. We had no idea where they were taking us. Sometime later, we were put in an elevator. When it reached its floor and the doors opened, we heard a fierce fight, and it quickly quieted down. When the bags were taken off our heads, we saw this gentleman with the glasses. He told us not to be anxious, that he had come on your behalf. We followed him here, and then you arrived. James noticed that the Soul Reaper had not revealed that he was a world-class assassin. He smiled ruefully, imagining the shocked expression on Edward's face if he had. James patted Edward's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it's all over now." He turned to the Soul Reaper and finally shook hands with him. "Thank you so much for what you did tonight. I owe you a huge favor." The Soul Reaper laughed and said, "You flatter me, Lord Hades. Dax is my brother. His concerns are my concerns. If there is anything else that I can ever do for you, you only need ask. Farewell." Like most assassins, the Soul Reaper tended to be a taciturn. They always endeavored to do all things cleanly and efficiently. As the bespectacled killer faded into the night, James reflected that as far as he was concerned, there was no friend like a world-class assassin. James continued to comfort the four women for a while before finding a random hotel to stay in. They recovered quickly. Although they had experienced a crisis, they were not as delicate as James had imagined. He reflected on their love and sincerity and the great joy they had brought into his life. After a peaceful night, James woke late in the morning in his large, comfortable bed. It had been the most restful night's sleep he'd enjoyed since Cindy had been kidnapped. He felt refreshed and full of energy. After washing up, James and the four women went out to eat breakfast together. Then he brought them with him to the Excalibur Company office. In the office, all of the employees were working as usual. No one knew about the earth-shattering fight that had occurred the previous night. As he walked through the door, the bald security guard who had previously hassled James based on his wardrobe respectfully nodded and saluted him. "Hello, boss." James smiled in response to his greeting, but the guard was so rattled that he quickly looked away, studying the opposite wall with intense interest. The four women behind James widened their eyes. Krista remarked, "They actually call you boss." This revelation had the biggest impact on Cindy, who had just recently joined the group. She pulled James aside and asked, "James, it can't be. You are the boss of this company?" James looked at her and smiled. Yes, Cindy was stunned. She had some understanding of prominent international companies. This Excalibur company dealt in mining ore. The headquarters was in London, but there were branches located all over the world. It was a very established and respected corporation. And now it transpired that James was the man in charge. It was simply too shocking. She had assumed that when James did business overseas, he was involved in some small way with foreign trade or something of that sort. But the Excalibur company's market value was in the tens of billions. The man she had chosen was wealthy and powerful beyond her wildest imagination. This was beyond thrilling. She still didn't know that this was just a drop in the bucket for James. Vanessa, Katie, and Krista were also surprised, but took it in stride. They had become accustomed to the fact of James's unimaginable wealth. Krista's relationship with Cindy had grown strong due to the many similarities in their personalities. She pulled Cindy aside and whispered, "Cindy, this is no big deal. James owns many companies like this all around the world." Cindy's eyes nearly popped out of her head. This man's combat abilities were extraordinary and made her feel safe. Now it transpired that even his financial resources were ridiculously vast. Based on his wealth and social status, logically speaking, his name should have appeared at the top of the World Forbes ranking list. Why had she never seen James's name on it? Also, when she had been at New York University, she had taken an interest in James and asked around about his family. She'd been told that he was from a very remote and poor small town in the mountains. He definitely had not come from money. He had only graduated 5 years ago. How could he have developed into a titan of industry so quickly? Had he inherited billions from some long-lost relative, as often happened in soap operas? Cindy was full of questions. But just as she was about to ask, Krista tapped her shoulder and murmured, "Cindy, James hates it when people ask him about this. He's promised to tell us all about it when the time is right." After spending time with Krista, Cindy had come to trust her. She was also a smart woman, so she curbed her curiosity and said, "I understand." The previous day, James had won the hearts of everyone in the company, and all of the employees respectfully greeted him as he walked through the office. This only increased the four women's admiration for him. In turn, seeing James' entourage of beauties impressed the employees all over again. Before coming in, James had arranged for Franklin to bring the company's financial documents to his office. Today, he wanted to examine them for himself. Franklin was waiting at the elevator on the first floor. He said respectfully, "Boss, all the information you want has been prepared for you." Franklin's brows were knitted with anxiety. James was like a god in Franklin's eyes. His face instantly relaxed. He had always regarded this company as his home. Relief flooded through him upon learning it was safe. They arrived at James's office. With their extensive experience, Vanessa, Katie, and Krista quickly entered work mode. Cindy, who had just joined the group, was unable to find anything to do. She wandered around the office feeling bored and out of place. Krista arranged for her to help with some records. Cindy's memory was extraordinary, and she quickly acclimated to the task. Her astonishing memory was also a great convenience to the other women's work. They all felt that she was another rare treasure that James had discovered. These four women were the equal of any professional team. He left them to their work, lying on the sofa and drinking coffee. He lazily admired the scenery outside this window, watching the mighty River Thames flowing by. As he watched the women's efficient work, he remembered a quote from a famous economist. "In any company, the one who gets the talent gains the world." James felt that this statement should be changed. He would phrase it thusly: "The one who gets the talented women gains the world."
Dear listener, the upcoming episode will be today's last free episode of this story. Come back tomorrow to enjoy free episodes, or get coins now to continue listening.
Many men in business believe that women are actually very selfish, and that when a group of them is brought together, jealousy creates all sorts of problems. James knew this was nonsense. When talented women presented a unified front, they could achieve anything. He didn't base this belief on academic theory, but on his own experience. The four women in his office were shockingly efficient. By the end of the day, they had produced a concise document summarizing all of the important data from all aspects of the company. Their report was so incisive that James could easily understand the company's current situation at a glance. Although there were many problems in the company, they were all minor flaws in James's eyes. The basic operations remained strong and stable. After reading the report, James asked Franklin to gather all of the company's higher-ups for his first official meeting. He was well prepared and the meeting went smoothly. At the conclusion of the meeting, James announced a very important decision. He wanted Edward to take over the position of former Vice President Castle. Edward's eyes welled with tears. In this great city, he had struggled to get ahead for 25 years. He had dreamed of finding a place in the upper class of London. Despite his best efforts, he seemed destined for a life of middle-class mediocrity. But today, this mysterious young man he had randomly met in a bar had actually made his dream come true with a single sentence. He was deeply grateful to James. He swore to himself that he would faithfully follow him for the rest of his life. Over the next few days, James did not stay idle. He got involved with the day-to-day flow of the business and helped to solve some of the more troublesome problems in the company. His group of women also contributed greatly to getting things back on the right track. Everyone had their own duties, and everyone was busy. As they got deeper into the work, Krista's natural leadership abilities came to the forefront. She functioned as James's strong right arm. This busy time was full of happiness, but happy times are always short-lived. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, James had been in London for 10 days. All of the company's issues had been settled. Edward, the new deputy leader, took to the position like a fish to water, with the full support of Franklin. James felt that it was time for him to take his women and continue his trip to the global check-in. At the London pier, Edward, Franklin, and the other higher-ups of the company all came to send James off. Edward, Franklin, I leave the company to you guys now. I like to travel, so it's time for me to be on my way. I'm interested in the journey, not the destination. The wind off the River Thames rustled James's clothes and hair, making him look very glamorous. Even though he was only wearing a few $100s worth of street goods, no one could deny his charisma. Edward said solemnly, "Boss, don't worry. Leave it to us. I promise to keep your company safe for you." James nodded. He trusted Edward and Franklin implicitly. He had observed the smooth cooperation between them. It was one of the reasons he felt that he could leave. Then he turned to Holt and the company's upper executive echelons and said, "Mr. Holt, and everyone else, you can do your work without worry. Please rest assured, I have never neglected talent. Work hard, work smart, and I promise you promotions and salary increases." As he finished speaking, the gathered employees applauded enthusiastically. Holt then spoke on behalf of everyone. "Boss, your words always get our blood up, fill us with energy. Don't worry, we'll definitely work hard, not only for the company, but also for ourselves." Holt's down-to-earth words made James feel confident. He gave Holt a thumbs up, then he and the 4 women boarded the waiting yacht. Under everyone's envious and reluctant gazes, the yacht slowly sailed down the River Thames. Even after the yacht had disappeared from their sight, the people on the pier remained standing, waving farewell. To Vanessa, Katie, and Krista, the yacht was too intimate, the quarters too close. However, to Cindy, who had always dreamed of traveling around the world, everything seemed fresh and exciting. The moment she boarded the yacht, she was like a little girl, looking around everywhere with unquenchable curiosity. The journey was so exciting, she felt as if she was dreaming again. As the yacht pulled farther and farther away from the pier, she could no longer suppress her excitement. She started to roll around on the deck, heedless of the spectacle she created. James and the other 3 beauties looked on awkwardly. Noticing their strange gazes, Cindy quickly said in embarrassment, "Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I really am too excited." She stood up and with a flushed face, pounced forward and hugged James's waist. She asked, "James, could it be possible that this yacht is also yours?" James kissed her alluring red lips, then grinned and said, "What do you think?" She was not used to this kind of public display of affection, and her face instantly turned red to her neck. I can't guess." She broke free from James's light embrace, then she asked, "Where are we going now?" James grinned and said, "Next stop, the capital of Iceland, Reykjavik."